They just had their first sweet moment. It's so weird because he's a ghost. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maylene if you are new here. Today I wanted to spend the entire day reading at home, not going anywhere, and just talking about books with you guys. It is about 8:30 or so in the morning. I've got coffee. I've already gone to Pilates. I have no other plans for today besides spending time reading and chatting about books with you. So hopefully that sounds fun. I wanted to talk really quickly about the books that I have been reading lately and just kind of give you guys really quick thoughts on those, and let me know if you've read any really good books so far this summer and this past year. I tend to like romance. I love fantasy. I love romantasy. Contemporary books are like my go-to during the summertime, but otherwise I love thrillers. Those are probably my top 3 categories. So lately I have read, we'll do like super lately. If you're interested in other books that I've read and how I rated them, I do have a Goodreads profile, so I'll link that for you guys in the description box. I'm pretty good about updating there. But recently I've read Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I read the whole series, and the first book did not love. It was a little bit too cheesy for me. The best part about Abby Jimenez books, I think, is the banter in the books, so that was really enjoyable. There were just certain parts of the book that felt a little bit too cheesy, but I was excited to see where that was going. So the next book in that series is Yours Truly, and that book actually made me cry a couple of times. I gave that book 5 stars. The last book in that little mini series is Just for the Summer, and I think she hit it out of the park with that one too. So if you were going to read the series, don't be discouraged if you didn't feel like Part of Your World was not a 5-star book, because the second and third book to me are much better. I read a couple of thrillers recently. I don't know if it's just me, but I have a really hard time remembering what happens in books, especially if I'm doing a lot of reading. Dark Across the Bay feels like you're watching an indie thriller short film. That's what it felt like for me. Listen for the Lie. Okay, this was a really cool book. It's a murder mystery about a girl who everyone thinks that she killed her best friend. She was there the night she was murdered. She was there when she was murdered, but she has no memory of the incident and what happened. And then this journalist suddenly gets a hold of the case, and he comes to her town and he's doing a podcast about the murder. He does like murder mysteries on his podcast. So he's going through and he's interviewing her, and the story is unfolding. She's like very slowly getting back memories, but also while you're reading, you're working through different perspectives of the entire town, because the podcaster is interviewing everybody in the town. So bit by bit, the story unfolds in different ways, and different people have different recollections of what happened. I rated it 4 stars, but thinking back, 4.5 stars, it feels like a 5-star book because it's so unique. I'm gonna stick with 4.5. The next one I read 2 back-to-back Emily Henry books. Funny Story, which is a newer one, and then Beach Read. Funny Story is a fake dating book. I really enjoyed that one. And then Beach Read, I gave 5 stars. I'm like having to look through my review because it's so hard for me to remember sometimes. But Beach Read is a book about authors, and I love reading about authors. And it also is an enemies to lovers situation, which is my #1 favorite trope. I said they just felt like real people going through real things. I love when books made me laugh. Oh, this book was so funny. I actually read this book when we went to Miami. I was constantly laughing while reading this. It gave me such a feeling of emotional attachment to the characters. There were moments I would be reading and my stomach would just drop. I adore that feeling. And I love the way that both of the main characters were written. I loved the love interest. So Beach Read is definitely one of my top ones. And then the last book, well, I'm currently reading Spark of the Everflame, which is a new fantasy series. But the last book that I read is by Ashley Poston, and it's The 7-Year Slip, which is the first book that I've ever read by her, and it absolutely felt like a whimsical fever dream rom-com movie. So it is about a girl whose aunt dies and she leaves her apartment to her, and the apartment has a magical there's magical happenings in the apartment. And then one day she steps into the apartment and there is a man there, but it's actually 7 years in the past. And it is so reminiscent of The Time Traveler's Wife, which I love. John always says it's a little bit creepy because if you're familiar with the movie The Time Traveler's Wife, the one with Rachel McAdams, she is a child at times, so it is a little creepy in that sense. This book was way less creepy. It's just one of those books where it's so sweet, so endearing. You don't know what's going to happen. They go from the past to the future. Will they find each other in the future? Will they be the same people in the future? And it just really has you rooting for the main characters. And I ended up giving this book 5 stars too. And I wasn't expecting to, but I just loved the whole idea of it and more of like the feeling of the book. So today we are reading The Dead Romantics, which is currently on sale on Kindle for $4.99. Really quickly, I'll tell you about my Kindle. This is a Kindle Oasis. I think it's the 10th generation, right? It should be linked in my Amazon. I love this thing. I do have a love handle grip on the back. I also have this linked in my Amazon for you. And I have Kindle Unlimited. Not every single book ever published is on Kindle Unlimited, but a lot of books are. So I'm able to read a lot more with my Kindle versus real physical book. It also is just way more comfortable to read on with my Kindle. I mean, this puts absolutely no strain on my wrist. It's easier to read at night with a Kindle. Reading outside is also very easy. It's just more portable in general than real books. And for the longest time, I didn't think I was going to enjoy reading from a screen. I was anti-screen reading. But one day I finally pulled the trigger. And when I tell you that I have not read more than with this thing, I mean it. I have access to books. I have access to books whenever I want. It's so easy to take with you. So if you have a couple moments, you can read. There are, again, a ton of books, like I said, that you can get for free on Kindle Unlimited. I also feel like I read a lot faster when I'm reading on a Kindle. So we are going to buy this book and hope it's a good one. It seems like she likes to write a lot about dead people, which I kind of love. And she's ready. We're gonna start cozy reading in the coziest place possible. If you have a book that you've been wanting to dive into, grab it, come read with me, and we can read together. I am going to be talking to you about my thoughts throughout the book, and anything that could be a spoiler I will not say, but I'll give you a spoiler warning and I'll put it on screen. That way, if you're reading this book or you know you're not going to read this book, but you still want to know what it is that's making me feel a certain way, you'll still be able to see it, but you won't be spoiled by listening. I am actually going to read just the first chapter out loud to you. That way you can tell maybe this is a book you want to pick up, maybe not, but you can get an idea of the writing style and the voice. Okay, now we're ready. Okay, there's a bit of a prologue situation before the first chapter. A buried story. In the back left corner of the days gone funeral home, underneath a loose floorboard, there was a metal box with a bunch of old journals inside. To anyone who found them, the scribbles looked like some teenager venting her sexual frustrations with Lestat or that one guy from the X-Files. And if you didn't mind ghosts and vampires and blood oaths and leather pants and true love, the stories were quite good. You could wonder why someone would shove journals full of smutty fanfiction underneath the floorboard of a century-old funeral home, but never question the mind of a teenager. You wouldn't get very far. I hid them there because, well, I just did, okay? Because when I left for college, I wanted to bury that part of me. That dark, weird, Addams Family side. And what was a more fitting place than a funeral home? And I almost succeeded, too. I'm actually so interested. A metal box with journals hidden in a floorboard in a funeral home. Okay. Chapter 1, The Ghostwriter. Every good story has a few secrets. At least that's what I've been told. Sometimes they're secrets about love, secrets about family, secrets about murder, some so inconsequential they barely feel like secrets at all, but monumental to the person keeping them. Every person has a secret. Every secret has a story. And in my head, every story has a happy ending. If I were the heroine in a story, I would tell you that I had 3 secrets. 1, I hadn't washed my hair in 4 days. 2, my family owned a funeral home. And 3, I was the ghostwriter of mega best-selling, critically acclaimed romance novelist Anne Nichols. And I was sorely late for a meeting. "Hold the door," I shouted, bypassing the security personnel at the front desk and sprinting toward the elevators. "Miss!" the befuddled security guard shouted after me. "You have to check in. You can't just—" "Florence Day, Falcon House Publishers. Call up to Erin and she'll approve me." I tossed over my shoulder and slid into one of the elevators, cactus in tow. As the doors closed, a graying man in a sharp business suit eyed the plant in question. "A gift to butter up my new editor," I told him, because I wasn't someone who just carried around small succulents wherever she went. God knows it's not for me. I kill everything I touch, including 3 cactuses. Cacti? Already. The man coughed into his hand and angled himself away from me. The woman on the other side said, as if to console me, "That's lovely, dear," which meant that this was a terrible gift. I mean, I figured it was, but I had been stranded for too long on the platform waiting for the B train, having a small panic attack with my brother on the phone when a little old lady with rollers in her hair tottered by selling cacti for like $1 a pop, and I bought things when I was nervous. Mainly books, but I guess now I bought houseplants too. The guy in the business suit got off on the 20th floor, and the woman who held the elevator left on the 27th. I took a peek into their worlds before the doors closed again. Immaculate white carpet or buffed wooden floors and glass cases where old books sat idly. There were quite a few publishers in the building, both online and in print, and there was even a newspaper on one of the floors. I could have been in the elevator with the editor for Nora Roberts, for all I knew. Whenever I came to visit the offices, I was always hyper-aware of how people took one look at me in my squeaky flats and darned hose and too big plaid overcoat and came to the conclusion that I was not tall enough to ride this ride. Which, fair. I stood at around 5'2", and everything I wore was bought for comfort and not style. Rose, my roommate, always joked that I was an 80-year-old in a 20-year-old body. Sometimes I felt it. Nothing said Netflix and chill quite like an orthopedic pillow and a wine glass of Ensure. When the elevator doors opened onto the 37th floor, I was alone, grasping my cactus like a life vest at sea. The offices of Falcon House Publishers were pristine and white, with 2 fluorescent bookshelves on either side of the entryway, touting all of the bestsellers and literary masterpieces they published over their 75-year history. At least half of the left wall was covered in books by Anne Nichols. The Sea Dweller's Daughter, The Forest of Dreams, The Forever House, ones my mom sighed over when I was a teenager. Next to them were Anne's newer books, The Probability of Love, A Rake's Guide to Getting the Girl, I was most proud of that title, and The Kiss at the Midnight Matinee. The glass reflected my face in the book covers, a pale white and sleep-deprived young woman with dirty blonde hair pulled up in a messy bun and dark circles under tired brown eyes, and a colorful scarf and an oversized beige sweater that made me look like I was the guest speaker at the Yarn of the Month Club and not one of the most distinguished publishing houses in the world. Technically, I wasn't the guest here. Anne Nichols was, and I was what everyone guessed was her lowly assistant, and I had a meeting to get to. I stood in the lobby awkwardly, the cactus pressed to my chest, as the dark-haired receptionist, Erin, held up a finger and finished her call. Something about salad for lunch. When she finally hung up, she looked up from her screen and recognized me. "Florence," she greeted with a bright smile. "Nice to see you up and about. How's Rose? That party last night was brutal." I tried not to wince thinking about Rose and I stumbling at 3 a.m. It sure was something. Is she still alive? Rose has survived worse. Erin laughed. Then she glanced around the lobby as if looking for someone else. Is Miss Nichols not going to make it today? Oh, no, she's still up in Maine doing her Maine thing. Erin shook her head. God, I wonder what it's like, being the Anne Nicholses and Stephen Kings of the world. Must be nice, I agreed. Anne Nichols hadn't left her small little island in Maine in 5 years, as long as I'd been ghostwriting for her anyway. I tugged down the multicolored scarf wrapped around my mouth and neck. While it wasn't winter anymore, New York always had one last kick of cold before spring, and that had to be today, and I was beginning to nervously sweat under my coat. Someday, Erin added, you're going to tell me how you became the assistant for the Anne Nichols. I laughed. I've told you before, a Craigslist ad. I don't believe that. I shrugged. C'est la vie. Erin was a few years younger than me, her Columbia University publishing certificate proudly displayed on her desk. Rose had met her a while back on a dating app, and they'd hooked up a few times, though now, from what I heard, they were strictly friends. The phone began to ring on her desk. Erin said quickly, "Anyway, you can go ahead. Still remember the way, yeah?" "Absolutely." "Perf, good luck," she added, and answered the call in her best customer service voice. "Good morning. You've reached Falcon House Publishers. This is Erin speaking." And I was left to my own devices. I knew where to go because I'd visited the old editor enough times to be able to walk the halls blindfolded. Tabitha Margraves had retired recently at the absolute worst time, and with every step closer to the office, I held tighter onto the poor cactus. Tabitha knew I ghost wrote for Anne. She and Anne's agent were the only ones who did. Well, besides Rose, but Rose didn't count. Had Tabitha passed that nugget of secrecy to my new editor? God, I hope so. Otherwise, this was going to be an awkward first meeting. The hallway was lined with frosted glass walls that were supposed to be used for privacy, but they provided extraordinary little of that. I heard editors in marketing and PR shadows talking in hushed tones about acquisitions, marketing plans, contractual obligations, tours, reallocating money from one's book budget to another. The things in publishing that no one ever really talked about. Publishing was all very romantic until you found yourself in publishing. Then it was just another kind of corporate hell. I passed a few assistant editors sitting in their square cubicles, manuscripts piled almost to the top of their half walls, looking frazzled as they ate carrots and hummus for lunch. The salads Erin ordered must not have included them, not that the editorial assistants made enough to afford eating out every day. The offices were set up in a hierarchy of sorts, and the further you went, the higher the salary. At the end of the hall, I almost didn't recognize the office. Gone were the floral wreath hanging on the door for good luck and the stickers plastered to the frosted glass privacy wall that read, "Try not, do," and "Romance isn't dead." For a second, I thought I'd made a wrong turn, until I recognized the intern in her small cubicle, stuffing ARCs, advanced reader copies, basically rough drafts of a book in paperback form, into envelopes with a harried sort of frenzy that bordered on tears. My editor didn't waste any time peeling off those decals and tossing the good luck wreath in the trash. I didn't know if that was a good sign or bad. Toward the end of her tenure at Falcon House, Tabitha Margraves and I butted heads more often than not. "Romance believes in happy endings. Tell Anne that," she would say, tongue-in-cheek, because, for all intents and purposes, I was Anne. "Well, Anne doesn't anymore," I would quit back, and by the time she turned in her resignation and retired down to Florida, I'm sure we were both plotting each other's demise. She still believed in love, somehow, impossibly, and I could see right through the lie. Love was putting up with someone for 50 years so you'd have someone to bury you when you died. I would know. My family was in the business of death. Tabitha called me cross when I told her that. I said I was realistic. There was a difference. I sat down in one of the two chairs outside of the office, the cactus in my lap, to wait and scroll through my Instagram feed. I don't love it when authors mention social media in books. I'm just going to come out and say that. Okay, back to the story. My younger sister had posted a photo of her and my hometown mayor, a golden retriever, and I felt a pang of homesickness. For the weather, the funeral parlor, my mom's amazing fried chicken, I wondered what she was cooking for dinner tonight. Lost in my thoughts, I didn't hear the office door open until a distinctly male voice said, "Sorry for the wait, please come in." I bolted to my feet in surprise. Did I have the wrong office? I checked the cubicles, the brown-haired workaholic intern cramming ARCs into envelopes to the left, the HR director sobbing into his salad on the right. No, this was definitely the right office. The man cleared his throat, impatiently waiting. Is this going to be the MMC? I hugged the cactus so tight to my chest I could feel the pot beginning to creak with the pressure and stepped into his office and froze. The man in question sat in the leather chair that for 35 years, longer than he'd been alive, I figured, Tabitha Margraves had inhabited. The desk, once cluttered with porcelain knickknacks and pictures of her dog, was clean and tidy, everything stacked in its proper place. The desk reflected the man behind it almost perfectly. Too polished, in a crisp, white button-down shirt that strained at his broad shoulders. It's always broad shoulders. The sleeves rolled up to his elbows to reveal rather intimidatingly sexy forearms. It's always sexy forearms. His black hair was swept back out of his long face and somehow accentuated his equally long nose, black square glasses perched on it, and there were very faint freckles speckled across his face, one by his right nostril, two on his cheek, one just above his thick red eyebrow, a constellation of them. For a second, I wanted to take a Sharpie and connect them to see what myth they held. The next second, I quickly came to the realization that, oh, he was hot, and I'd seen him before. At publishing functions with Rose or my ex-boyfriend. I couldn't place the name, but I'd definitely run into him more than once. I held my breath, wondering if he recognized me. Did he? For a second I thought so, because his eyes widened just a fraction, just enough for me to suspect he knew something before it vanished. I like that. He cleared his throat. You must be Ann Nichols' assistant, he greeted without missing a beat. He stood and came around the desk to offer his hand. He was enormous. So tall, I felt like I'd suddenly been transported into a retelling of Jack and the Beanstalk, where he was a very hunky beanstalk that I really, really wanted to climb. No, Florence, bad girl, I scolded myself. You do not want to climb him like a tree, because he's your new editor and therefore very incredibly, stupendously unclimbable. Florence, stay, I said as I accepted his hand. His almost completely enveloped mine in a strong handshake. Benji Andor, but you can call me Ben, he introduced. Florence, I repeated, shocked that I could mutter anything above a squeak. The edges of his mouth quirked up. So you said. I quickly pulled my hand away, mortified. Oh God, right, sorry. I sat down a little too hard in the uncomfortable IKEA chair, cactus planted firmly on my knees. My cheeks were on fire, and if I could feel them, I knew that he could see I was blushing. He sat down again and adjusted the pen on his desk. It's a pleasure to meet you. Sorry for the wait, the subways were hell this morning. Aaron keeps telling me not to take the B train, and yet I'm a fool who does every single time. Or a masochist, I added before I could stop myself. He parked a laugh. Maybe both. I bit the inside of my cheek to hide a smile. He had a great laugh, the kind that was deep and throaty like a rumble. Oh, no. This was not going as planned at all. He liked me, and he wasn't going to like me in about 5 minutes. I didn't even like myself for what I was here to do. Why did I think a cactus gif would make this easier? He scooted his chair in and straightened a pen to be horizontal with his keyboard. Everything was neat like that in his office, and I got the very distinct feeling that he was the kind of person who, if he found a book misplaced at a bookstore, would return it to the shelf where it belonged. Everything had its place. He was a bullet journal guy, and I was a sticky note kind of girl. That's cute. That might have been a good thing, actually. He seemed very no-nonsense, and no-nonsense people were rarely romantic, and so I wouldn't get a pitying look when I, eventually, tell him that I no longer believed in romance novels, and he would nod solemnly, knowing exactly what I meant. And I would rather have that than Tabitha Margraves looking at me with those sad, dark eyes and asking, "Why don't you believe in love anymore, Florence?" Because when you put your hand in the fire too many times, you learn that you only get burned. My new editor shifted in his seat. "I'm sorry to hear that Miss Nichols couldn't make it today. I would have loved to meet her," he began, wrenching me from my thoughts. I shifted in my seat. "Oh, Tabitha didn't tell you? She never leaves Maine. I think she lives on an island or something. It sounds nice. I would never want to leave either. I hear Maine's pretty." "It is. I grew up there," he replied. "Saw many a moose. They're huge." "Are you sure you aren't half moose yourself?" my traitorous brain said, and I winced because that was very wrong and very bad. "I guess they prepared you for the rats in New York?" He laughed again, this time surprising himself, and he had a glorious white smile, too. It reached his eyes, turning brown to a melting ochre. "Nothing could prepare me for those. Have you seen the ones down in Union Square? I swear one had a jockey on him." "Oh, you didn't know? There's some great rat races down at 18th Street Station. Do you go often?" "Absolutely. There's even a squeakeasy." That's cute. "Wow, you're a real maestro of puns." I snorted a laugh and looked away, anywhere other than him, because I liked his charm and I definitely didn't want to, and I hated disappointing people, and he cleared his throat and said, "Well, Miss Day, I think we need to talk about Anne's upcoming novel." I gripped the cactus in my lap tighter. My eyes jumped from barren wall to barren wall. There was nothing in the office to look at. It used to be full of things, fake flowers and photos and book covers on the wall, but now the only thing on the walls was a framed master's degree in fiction. "Does it have to be romance?" I blurted. Surprised, he cocked his head. "This is a romance imprint." I know, but, you know how Nicholas Sparks writes depressing books and John Green writes melodramatic sick lit? Do you think Miss Nichols could do something in that vein instead? He was quiet for a moment. "You mean a tragedy." When I was growing up, my mother read Anne Nichols's books, and because of that, I did too. When I was 12, I would sneak into the romance section in the library and quietly read The Forest of Dreams between the stacks. I knew her catalog back and forth like a well-played discography of my favorite band, and then I became her pen. While Anne's name was on the cover, I wrote The Probability of Love and A Rake's Guide to Getting the Girl and The Kiss at the Midnight Matinee. For the last 5 years, Anne Nichols had sent me a check to write the book in question, and then I did, and the words in those books, my words, had been praised from the New York Times Book Review to Vogue. Those books sat on shelves behind Nora Roberts and Nicholas Sparks and Julia Quinn, and they were mine. I wrote for one of romance's greats, a job anyone would die to have, and I I was failing. Perhaps I'd already failed. I just asked for my last trump card to write a book that was anything, everything but a happily ever after, and he said no. Mr. Ender, I began, my voice cracking. The truth is, Anne needs to deliver the manuscript by the deadline, he interrupted in a cold, no-nonsense voice. The warmth it held a few minutes before it was gone. I felt myself getting smaller by the moment, shrinking into the hard IKEA chair. That's tomorrow, I said softly. Yes, tomorrow. And if she can't? He pressed his lips into a thin line. He had a sort of wide mouth that dipped in the middle, expressing things that the rest of his face was too guarded to. How much time does she need? A year? 10 years? An eternity? A month? I asked hopefully. His dark brows shot up. Absolutely not. These things take time. I understand that, he replied, and I flinched. He took off his black-rimmed glasses to look at me. May I be frank with you? No, absolutely not. Yes, I ventured. Because Anne's already asked for 3 deadline extensions, even if we get it tomorrow, we'd have to push it quickly through copy edits and pass pages, and that's only if we get it tomorrow to keep our schedule. This is Anne's big fall book, a romance, mind you, with a happily ever after. That's her brand. That's what we signed for. We already have promotions lined up. We might even have a full-page spread in the New York Times. We're doing a lot for this book, so when I prodded Anne's agent to speak with her, she connected me with you, her assistant. I knew that part. Molly Stein, Anne's agent, wasn't very happy to get a call about the book in question. She thought everything had been going smoothly. I hadn't the heart to tell her otherwise. Molly had been pretty hands-off with my ghostwriting gig, mostly because the books were part of a 4-book deal, this being the last one, and she trusted that I wouldn't mess up. Yet here I was. I didn't even want to think about how Molly would break the news to Anne. I didn't want to think about how disappointed Anne would be. I'd met the woman once, and I was deathly afraid of failing her. I didn't want to do that. I looked up to her, and the feeling of failing someone you look up to, it sucked as a kid and it sucked as an adult. Benji went on. Whatever is keeping Miss Nichols from finishing her manuscript has become a problem not only for me, but for marketing and production. And if we want to stay on schedule, we need that manuscript. I know, but... And if she can't deliver, he added, then we'll have to get the legal department involved, I'm afraid. The legal department. That meant a breach of contract. That meant I would have messed up so big that there would be no coming back from it. I would have failed not just Anne, but her publisher and her readers, everyone. I'd already failed like that once. The office began to get smaller, or I was having a panic attack, and I really hoped it was the former. My breath came in short bursts. It was hard to breathe. Miss Florence, are you okay? You seem a little pale, he observed, but his voice sounded a football field away. Do you need some water? I shoved my panic into a small box in the back of my head where everything else went. All of the bad things, the things I didn't want to deal with, the things I couldn't deal with. The box was useful. I shut everything in, locked it tight. I pressed on a smile. Oh no, I'm fine. It's a lot to take in, and you're right. Of course you're right. He seemed doubtful. Tomorrow then? Yeah, I croaked. Good. Please tell Miss Nichols that I said my regards, and I'm very happy to be working with her. And I'm sorry, is that a cactus? I just noticed. I looked down at the succulent, all but forgotten in my lap, as my panic banged on the box in my head, lock rattling, to get free. I thought I hated this man, and if I stayed in this office any longer, I was going to either throw this cactus at him or cry, maybe both. I jerked to my feet and put the succulent on the edge of the desk. It's a gift. Then I gathered my satchel and turned on my heels and left Falcon House Publishers without another word. I held myself together until I stumbled out of the revolving door of the building and into the brisk April day and let myself crumble. I took a deep breath and screamed in obscenity into the perfect blue afternoon sky, startling a flock of pigeons from the side of the building. I needed a drink. No, I needed a book. A murder thriller. Hannibal. Lizzie Borden. Anything would do. Maybe I needed both. No. Definitely both. That was chapter 1. I will say it is always a bit cringy. It's a little bit more cringy to read aloud when the main character realizes, oh my gosh, like this guy in front of me is so attractive. But it's a very minute part that obviously sets us up for the rest of the book. So far, I actually like the way she writes Florence's inner monologue. It feels very realistic. Obviously, this is not a work of like great fiction, but it is very easy to read, and it kind of feels like you are living in the moment with her, and in this case in sort of like a rom-com environment. The beginning of the book to me is very reminiscent of The Hating Game. I mentioned earlier I love reading books about authors, writers, so this is checking a lot of boxes for me. I love the initial attraction. It seems like Florence has one of those quirky personalities, but at the same time she might be a little bit of a people pleaser. Also, I didn't share with you guys the premise of the book because I like to very briefly read about it. The thing that I care most about is the reviews, and I'm happy to go into books not fully knowing every detail. Obviously, books translate a little differently when you are listening to them or it's being read aloud versus when you're reading the words on the page. It's a much different feeling, but being able to read the words on the page, much different feeling. But let me know your initial thoughts. I'm gonna dive in and get into the nitty-gritty now. That's so funny. She's describing what her editor looks like, and she said, you know that book I let you borrow, the one by Sally Thorne, The Hating Game? The beginning of this book reminds me of, and she's using The Hating Game to describe what the main character looks like. Buying books always made me feel better, even if I never read them. As it turns out, when you solved a murder at 13 by talking with ghosts, the newspapers printed exactly that. Local girl solves murder with ghosts. You can imagine how that sort of thing could haunt you. Punny. One of the only good things to come out of this writing gig was the fact that I could write books off on taxes, even if I never read them, even if I used them to build book thrones and then sit down and cry on them while pouring myself glass after glass of Merlot. And the small hint of serotonin did make me feel a little less murderous. This book is just funny. We finished chapter 2, and apparently she sees ghosts. Her and her dad see ghosts, and her dad is the owner or the director of the funeral home, and Florence does not like talking to ghosts, which is interesting. All that we had left was dino-shaped mac and cheese, perfect depression food at least. I love when authors who are trying to write a relatable character include just little mundane relatable things. Florence right now is making macaroni and cheese. She dumps the macaroni into a pot full of water. I didn't even wait for it to start boiling. It would eventually. And little things like that, like they sound so silly, but it's things like that that like help you connect. It's like little micro connections with the character. I feel like for lunch today I should make macaroni and cheese in honor of Florence. We have made it to chapter 4. We've been introduced to her editor, her family, her best friend, and I'm learning a bit more about her personality, and I really like the setup so far. I didn't fully know the entire premise of the book before going in. I usually just kind of glaze over it so I can be surprised as I go, but so far I'm happy with my decision. Chapter 4 is called Fated Mates. her friend Rose dragged her out to a sort of reading performance house, poetry house situation, and she ran into her ex-boyfriend who totally ripped her heart out. And so she's escaping to the back alley, and she runs into her editor, and she's just a whole mess. I love all the references to death that she puts in here. I'm loving all the death references. Okay, apparently her whole family also lived in the funeral home. I just double checked what the blurb of the book is because, again, I don't read them. So she sees ghosts and her editor is dead. Ghosts didn't look like they did in the movies, at least from my experience. They weren't mangled, flesh rotting off their bones, they weren't pale as if some unfortunate actor had a bad run-in with baby powder, and they didn't glow like Casper. They shimmered, actually, when they moved, just enough to make them look a little wrong. Sometimes they looked as solid as anyone living, but other times they were faded and flickering, like a light bulb on its last wire. Benji Andor looked like that, standing on the welcome mat to the Days Gone funeral home. He looked like how his memories remembered him. The knight in colloquialism, his dark hair neatly gelled back, his suit jacket fitted to his shoulders, his black slacks pressed. His tie was a little askew though, just enough to make me want to straighten it. The spring wind that rattled through the dead oak tree didn't mess up his hair, and the light from our foyer didn't sit right on his face, and his shadow was gone. He shimmered slightly like a holograph in glitter. I reached out toward him, slowly, to touch his chest, and my hand went through him. It was cold, a burst of frost. He stared down at my hand in his sternum, and I whispered just as he cursed, "Fuck." Chapter 9, Dead on Arrival. Too good. We'll see you in the morning over at the Awful Waffle, code for Waffle House. 10. I miss Waffle House. Now that they mention it, though, I am hungry. My senior year prom date bought a corsage from them that ended up being haunted. I didn't want to think about how that happened, just like I didn't want to think about the deep, twisting vein of sadness in my stomach, and how as time passed in Marymount and Dad wasn't here, it kept growing. Would it go away someday? Would the dagger in my side slowly shrink to a paper cut? Would the grief ever disappear? Would it always be there, just under the surface, lurking in the way only grief could? I'd always written how grief was hollow, how it was a vast cavern of nothing, but I was wrong. Grief was the exact opposite. It was full and heavy and drowning because it wasn't the absence of everything you lost. It was the culmination of it all. Your love, your happiness, your bittersweets wound tight like a knotted ball of yarn. Kind of a silly thing to get emotional over. It's really not that big of a deal, but her dad, who is dead, ordered flowers to be sent to a widow's house because her husband sent her those specific flowers every year on their anniversary. Just so sweet. They just had their first sweet moment. It's so weird because he's a ghost. Okay, I just got to chapter 15. I'm really enjoying it so far, but I am going to bring out the clicker. Apparently, he did recognize her the first time that they met. Of course he did. So I fell asleep reading. Tesla woke me up because she was trying really hard to get at something. And there's a lizard that I now have to catch that I think is playing dead. I don't know if lizards can play dead. It's not a small lizard. I really don't want to do this. I was just telling my coworkers the other day how growing up in Florida, I would catch lizards. I don't know if I want to say this on the internet. But anyways, lizards will bite if you put something in their mouth. So we would catch lizards and put them on our ears. I was little, okay? I don't want to catch a lizard right now. Okay, the lizard is outside. I don't know if it's alive. I am at chapter 21. I'm gonna make some boxed mac and cheese because that is what she was eating in the book, and now that I'm up for my nap, why not? The book is still interesting so far. It's still keeping my attention. I mean, I was sleeping, but I think that's because I was curled up and cozy. But the book is keeping my attention, which is interesting because it's not like a whole lot is happening. She's trying to prepare for her dad's funeral. She keeps getting visits from her editor, but normally ghosts stick around if they have unfinished business, and she's not quite sure what her editor, Benji, what his unfinished business is, but it has something to do with her. So what I'm thinking right now is that we know there is a connection between Ben and Ann Nichols, who she is ghostwriting for. In my head, I'm wondering if they might be related. I'm not sure, but he definitely knew who she was. If the woman that she's ghostwriting for had talked about her, but she didn't really know her that well, so I still have no idea. But we also know that Ben, her editor, read her books and liked them. And she also is still very attracted to him, even though he is a ghost. And we do have confirmation that he died. So clearly they're not going to end up together, but maybe it's just gonna be, he gives her hope that love is still something that she's capable of and still something that's worth exploring, because she's kind of given up on love. Okay, I don't think that he is related to Ann Nichols, actually. don't know if my camera picks up on goosebumps, but I took a long time in the bathroom. Too long. I didn't know if I wanted him gone by the time I got out, or if I wanted him to still be there, sitting on the side of my bed. No, I did know what I wanted, but I was afraid. I wanted him to stay. Ben, my voice caught in my throat as I left the bathroom and found him lying on the bed, turned onto his side. He was so long that his feet almost reached the end. He was still. Of course he was dead. But it unnerved me until I crawled gently under the covers on the other side. His eyes fluttered open. I'll get up. Stay, I said. You're very bossy. It's cute. And you're stubborn. Then quieter. Please. He put his head back on the pillow. On one condition. What? Tell me to stay again. I scooted closer to him, so close that if we were alive, our breaths would mingle and our knees would knock together, and I could pull my fingers through his hair. I said softly, a secret and a prayer. Stay. You did say romance was dead. I tilted my head looking at his reflection in the mirror. Aren't you? Cute. got goosebumps. I'm like, I'm about 82% into the book. Page 290. And he's about to tell her something, and you can just feel that it's going to be big. Did not call it. nose. I'm an idiot. Okay, I'm almost done. This book is so delightful. I do cry very easily in books. It's all overwhelming. But this, I did not predict. I think I can put my glasses back on now. Have about 10% left. Because ghost stories were just love stories about here and then and now and when, about pockets of happiness and moments that resonated in places long after their era. They were stories that taught you that love was never a matter of time, but a matter of timing, and this was not mine. Yes. Rose told me that Wednesday, if I spiraled anymore, I'd drill myself to the center of the earth, so I tried to spiral more quietly. need to see how many pages I actually have left, because sometimes the Kindle lies and it will end before you think. John's coming home, probably just in time to see me cry. Hey, baby.